Hey everybody, welcome to the October 25th RMF Q&A. As you may know, this is I usually do this on Saturdays, but I'm going to be traveling this weekend, so I decided to do it on a Wednesday and open it up to the big group. So I hope I have some viewers that clicked on the link. Been posting it on the groups madly all day, so nobody would miss it who wanted to be here. So, oh, we got questions coming in. Wow, I wasn't prepared for questions to come in so fast because I have a bunch of stuff I want to talk about first. So I will go back. I'll get to your questions for sure. I just want to get through the things that I promised I would talk about first. Um, Firstly, there was a post recently, I think it was in the big group. I just saw it and decided that I would look into it a little bit because it's not a question that I hear very often. It had to do with an ulcer in a dog. So when this member mentioned that her dog had been diagnosed with an ulcer, I was inspired to see what the vets have up their sleeves for the treatment for a hole in the stomach, which is what an ulcer is. Whether it goes in just a portion of the tissue in the stomach or if it goes all the way through, it's still a hole. And I shouldn't have been surprised by what I found because it's the same nonsense that the medical doctors have been um, expounding all of these years, all these decades on the topic of ulcers. Um, Basically, what they do is they kill the bacteria that are there to eat the dead tissue, and they give these drugs that are called gastroprotectants gastroprotective drugs because they inhibit the production of acid, and they also recommend bland foods. Um, what is not understood by the people who believe all of this, that all of that is the solution, is that there's a reason why the body is producing so much acid, and that is what needs to be eliminated. The reason, not the acid and not the organs that produce it. We don't need to attack those organs and make them stop what they're doing because they are just responding to a situation that we can control, that we can do something about. So I looked up a couple of resources to get information about this, and of course, it's the same. It's the same stuff whether you go from one website to another. It's just the list is endless. Google has made sure of that you will only get conventional medical information. It's very different now than it was 5 years ago. Even 5 years ago, it's very different. So whether you read it on a pet insurance website or a vet website or a supposedly dog health journal or magazine, it's all the same thing. It might vary a little bit if the resource happens to call itself holistic or natural, but the same mistakes are going to be made. Absolutely the same mistakes. And from on what one website I read, quote, treatment of gastric ulceration may be undertaken via drug therapy, a class of medications referred to as gastroprotectants are commonly employed to help reduce gastric acid production, alleviate inflammation, reduce pain, and generally help the body heal itself. So it might alleviate inflammation, but what do we know about inflammation? Inflammation is there to help solve the problem. The body brings heat and fluids to an area where the wastes at that site are threatening to harm the tissues. So the inflammation brings fluids to dilute the wastes and heat to accelerate the whole process of eliminating them out of the body. And of course, once you do that, the pain goes away. So it does reduce pain. It doesn't help the body heal itself, though. What really helps the body heal itself is when you try to understand why your symptoms are happening, why the dog's symptoms are happening, and take away that cause. So in the case of ulcers, we need to wonder what is causing the body to produce so much acid. These acids, these digestive fluids, they have to be manufactured by the body. They're in limited supply. They have great value to the body. Why would the body squander them? It's just not logical that to think that the body is squandering its vital fluids. So what we need to do is figure out why the body is producing too much acid. And for that, we need to look at what we're feeding to dogs and what we are eating ourselves. So continuing on this topic, I don't think there's even the slightest possibility that the body's making a mistake when it's creating too much acid, even when it causes ulcers. I think it is far more likely that the sickness industry is the one that is mistaken. In fact, since there's so much money to be made from this thinking that the body is making mistakes that need correcting with drugs, I think it's far more likely that this is an idea that's just been made up in order to facilitate the making of money. It seems really clear to me. But even in a resource like Whole Dog Journal, you know, I used to think a long time ago that Whole Dog Journal was holistic, I guess because of that word whole. It's not even really implied in the title that this is alternative or holistic information. And what I've read lately in Whole Dog Journal makes me think I must have been mistaken about that idea that I first had about them. Because it says on Whole Dog Journal about ulcers, quote, Helicobacter pylori is well known as a cause of gastric ulceration in humans. This bacteria infects over 50% of people, though many never have symptoms. Well, this bacteria is always there, even though it doesn't cause symptoms sometimes. Isn't that a mystery? How can it be there and be a cause and not cause the effect that it is said to cause when it does cause the effect? Continuing on, H. pylori has also been isolated in dogs. However, its significance in relation to gastric ulcers in dogs is unknown. Oh, well, they're not going out on a limb then and saying that it causes ulcers. They do that with humans, but apparently not with dogs. The GI tract of some dogs can be populated with H. pylori, even though the dog never has symptoms of GI problems, while others have symptoms but no H. pylori. So there you go. We can toss out that H. pylori has anything to do with ulcers, because we have evidence that sometimes it's there with no symptoms and sometimes the symptoms are there without H. pylori. So this is ridiculous. We need to look elsewhere. So it continues on. If gastric ulcers are present and the cause cannot be found, H. pylori may be the culprit. It can be diagnosed either with a biopsy taken during endoscopy or by appropriate empirical therapy. Treatment is a month of the antibiotics, and it names a couple of antibiotics, as well as antacids like Pepcid and Prilosec. So we're going to stop the body for producing acid from responding the way it naturally would to this crap that's coming into the body. We're going to do that. And we're also going to kill the bacteria that are there to eat the dead tissue and the waste. That's the solution. I don't think so. That's not the solution at all. Okay. Moving on to a couple other questions. And let me see here. Okay, I have a question about wild game meat. She says, I was wondering if you could help me with a question I have about wild game meat. I live in an area where hunting is popular, and I'm able to get to access free wild deer meat from hunters that don't or want or need the excess meat. Oh, lucky you. I may have to do the processing myself, but I would be willing to do it for such a high quality and free meat for my pets. Yes, absolutely. It's not only that it's free, that's fabulous, but I mean, if somebody, if there's a hog farm next door and they're going to give you all of their pig fat that's left over, that it might be free, but it's still not something you're going to want to give to your dogs. But this stuff is of such high quality, you can't even buy it on the commercial market. So you're definitely right to not pass up that opportunity. She says, the only concern I have is that I have read that the lead bullets hunters use can potentially fragment in the meat and leave pieces that are too small to see or remove. Some people argue that it isn't an issue as the meat around the bullet site is trimmed and any fragments that remain would just pass through the digestive tract without being absorbed, while others say it could lead to heavy metal toxicity. I'm not sure what to think and was wondering if you have any insight on this topic. Yes, I do. I don't have any, scientific knowledge about this or anything. I just have my understanding of how the body treats metals, and I don't see any reason to think that a lead fragment or even a whole bullet wouldn't just be pushed out with the poop. The body cannot make use of metals unless they are in a form that constitutes food. That's why we can't take in minerals from so-called mineral water. And we can't get our minerals from eating rocks. We have to eat plants to get our minerals, and dogs have to eat bones to get their minerals. So the only possible hazard, in my opinion, that these would present would be tooth breakage, and that would require, of course, a big fragment or an entire bullet. And I think that would only be a problem if you're feeding game birds regularly, like some people do in the UK. I've never had the opportunity to feed game birds. So I don't have any experience with, coming across a bullet, but I imagine it gets discussed on, there is a game meat for dogs, I think, something like that, group on Facebook. It might come up if you put in game meat for dogs. I don't know if that's the exact title, but anyway, they would have lots of information on there because that's all they do is, they swap birds that they've killed and venison bones and whatnot. I've been feeding my own dog hunted venison bones for 20 years or more, and I have never encountered a bullet or a fragment of one. So in my mind, it's not an issue, but if you see it, definitely take it out. But if it goes through, it just goes through. I don't see any reason not to think that it would just go through. I mean, when dogs eat pebbles, dogs can eat pebbles from time to time. And if they're big enough to pass through all the way through the digestive tract, they just come out in the poop. So anyway, and I was going to go through this little chart here that you guys might have seen. It's been floating around social media, and it has 14 fruits on it. And I was just going to go through and say whether or not I agree with some of this stuff. I don't know who made this up. There's no attribution anywhere, but it has three different categories of fruits. There's the green light and the yellow light and the red light, basically. So these are good, these are okay, and these are not good. So in the yes category, we have bananas, and I would say absolutely, I totally agree with that. Bananas are fine. We don't even need to know that they're high in potassium and vitamin C. We just need to know that most dogs love them, and they're a very dense source of fuel. Blueberries are fine. I don't feed a lot of blueberries myself because the blueberries that I find, the fresh blueberries that I find out there in the marketplace are picked unripe, and they're very often not very sweet. I do feed blueberries from time to time that I buy frozen because those are wild, and my understanding is that when blueberries are sold frozen, they're actually allowed to ripen on the bush longer than when they are picked for the fresh market. So those blueberries, you might have better luck with the frozen blueberries if you see them coming out in your dog's poop. Kiwis, I don't feed kiwis. I don't eat kiwis. I find them to be just too tart. I've never really liked kiwis myself. Same with pineapple. Pineapple is very sweet, but it's also quite acidic. And I've actually seen lots of dogs reject pineapple, and same with strawberries. So kiwis, pineapple, and strawberries, I think are a bit too acidic for dogs. There are some dogs that enjoy pineapple, and I wouldn't discourage people from feeding pineapple, but I just wouldn't feed very much of it. In the yes, but category, this is kind of like the maybe category, um, apples. And apples should not be in this category. Apples belong in that yes category because they are fine food for dogs. They require a bit more chewing than dogs can manage sometimes, than some dogs can manage. But the thing that puts them in this category here is the fact that they have seeds, and people are always warning about the cyanide in the seeds. And it's true that apple seeds have a little cyanide, but they'd have to be chewed and ground very finely in order for the dog's body to access the cyanide and be affected by it. And dogs just aren't going to do that. The seeds are just going to come through whole. And many times dogs will not even eat the seeds. My dog gets apple cores all the time, and she leaves the seeds. Lemons should be in the no category instead of the maybe category. Oranges are kind of like okay if your dog likes them and you don't see the whole membranes coming through in the poop. Oranges can be quite sweet, and I'm told that some dogs really like oranges, or like the little tangerines. So they're fine if your dog likes them. Peaches are fine. You should definitely remove the pit because it can be a blockage hazard. And watermelon belongs in the yes category. This is ridiculous. It says remove the rind first, so it's kind of like apple seeds. That's why it's in this category, because of the rind. And some dogs can get real enthusiastic about eating watermelon and eat the whole thing. And apparently the rind is not digestible. It's just very dense, and dogs don't have the little key that unlocks the cellulose. So so the rind can be a problem. In the no category, it has avocados, and it says it can cause vomiting. I've never seen a dog vomit because of avocados. I don't think it's a problem. I would definitely not let a dog near an avocado pit. Same with a mango pit. Those can really be problematic. But I don't see anything wrong with feeding avocados. They're a little bit high in fat, and for that reason, they can be a bit of a combining issue if you're putting them together with plant foods. Cherries are a bit acidic. They're kind of like pineapple, but it says can cause cyanide poisoning in large quantities. So that's ridiculous. Cherry pits are not going to be broken down. They're not going to be chewed. Even if they are chewed by a dog, what's basically going to happen is they're going to be broken in half. And even that is not enough to access the cyanide inside, in my opinion. So anyway, cherries are fine, but they're a pain to feed dogs because, well, I suppose you could just feed them whole. I don't know. I know that coyotes go to cherry orchards and eat cherries, and so do wolves. But and they just swallow the seeds, and the seeds come out the other end. And grapes and raisins, as we know, grapes and raisins. Raisins are another matter. I would not feed raisins to a dog, even if it weren't for this myth about them causing kidney failure. Grapes, I wouldn't hesitate to feed to a dog. I know literally hundreds of people who feed grapes to their dogs. All kinds of evidence and information that opposes or that contradicts this idea that they are toxic. Raisins, maybe, I'm just not really into feeding a lot of dried fruit to begin with. So, okay, lots of questions coming in. Okay. I'm glad you guys are taking advantage of this. Okay, next topic that was on my list, and I'm just going to plow through these really quick. This week I was involved in a couple of discussions on the various Facebook pages of shelters, animal shelters, where they were complaining about how parvo is costing them money and capacity because they have to close down. So they have to turn dogs away because they need to isolate their afflicted dogs. And the only way they can do that is to just close down. So interestingly, one of these shelters even admitted that the dogs that they'd recently lost to parvo were completely vaccinated. They actually said that. They didn't have to say that. They didn't have to volunteer that information, but they did. And of course, this practically called to me to point out the flaws in their thinking. But when I did that, of course, my comments were just removed. But my comment, or what I wanted to say here about it, is that it just further illustrates how the drug industry has the rescue community in its back pocket. Because when you compare the number of breeders that are open to more natural methodologies and raising dogs naturally to the near unanimity that these drug-based approaches enjoy in the rescue community, you can see that the breeders are just responding to what they observe in their own bottom line, because they have to be personally accountable and responsible, because they know that how they raise their dogs affects how they turn out. And unfortunately, the shelter community has no such compunction because they pretty much consider dogs disposable. If not literally and consciously, in effect they do, because they sacrifice them every day to their masters in big pharma. They don't question the orders that they are given to subject animals to drugs and vaccines, even while the animals are symptomatic and highly stressed from their traumatic circumstances. And this just causes them to become sick. It causes them to become so sick sometimes that they die. And when that happens, all that the shelter community can think of to do is bring in more medical heroics. And this is very expensive. And when the animals die and when they get sick, it gives them an opportunity to make more public appeals for money. And I don't know about anybody else, but when I give my money to anybody, I would like to make sure that they have done everything within their power to solve their problems. I think that's incumbent upon somebody asking for the community's help to demonstrate that they have tried to solve their own problems. Isn't that just logic? Isn't that just the way things are or should be? But instead, they make sure that with every adoption, the adopters are thoroughly on board with the drug-based methods, and adopters have to promise to continue them or not get the animal, be denied access. So even the people working in that community don't realize that they are functioning as a huge PR arm for the veterinary pharmaceutical industry. And I know that they're in a really tough spot because they truly do need veterinary help for some of the animals that come into their care. And the industry has just taken advantage of that fact. Where the industry has shown its absolute heartlessness is the routine drugging and meddling that is done to the animals, and in coercing the shelter community into enforcing these methods on all new adopters. And what are you supposed to do if you want a chemically undamaged animal to adopt? What do you do if you want to adopt, but you also want a healthy animal? You have to decide if you're going to take one of their chemically damaged animals to save its life. And who doesn't want to do that? Or if you want a healthy dog and make your own life happy, you know, give your dog a head start into a healthy life instead of starting in the hole like shelter dogs. So anyway, that's my rant about the shelter community. It's just so unfortunate. And if any of you guys watching or listening to this know people who work in the shelter community, you know, try to introduce RMF and you know, see if you can make any headway. You have to start questioning these methods that they're using. Everybody has to start questioning it. Okay, and there's one more question here that I needed to tackle because I said I would this morning, and then I will get to your questions. So this is about, it's a question that came into the private group this morning. And it is about MRSA, MRSA. I'll just read the question. My dog was diagnosed with MRSA and was oozing from lesions, etc., for well over a year. Okay, so it sounds like this is on the mend. Continuing on with the quote, this is what brought me to this group. Now myself and my daughter seem to have it. Her on legs and me on leg and groin. I have gone down a rabbit hole online, desperate to heal it, and only get more and more scared. It's hard when my daughter is involved. I'm a vegetarian, eat healthy, and work out every day. My daughter is not a vegetarian. Maybe this is a topic for the human portion of the Q&A. Any advice for a spiraling mom? Okay, end of question. So for those of you who don't know what MRSA is, it's a form of a skin lesion or so-called infection that is supposedly caused by a strain of bacteria that is resistant to the normal drug that is used to kill bacteria, namely methicillin. So the acronym MRSA stands for methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. So it's a staph, S-T-A-P-H, staph infection, in other words. And before I say any more on this topic, let me just say that when you have the drug name just handily stuck right into the diagnosis, isn't that so self-serving? It's like diagnosing a headache as either an aspirin remediated headache or a non-aspirin remediated headache. It's like when you have a headache, there are other options besides taking aspirin. But if it's right there in the diagnosis, it looks like those are your two choices, doesn't it? So this is just more self-serving ridiculousness from the sickness industry. And there's lots more of that surrounding this topic. This condition is said to be zoonotic, which means it is thought to be contagious from animals to humans. It's not, of course, but when more than one member of a household have it at the same time, practitioners will always assume that one caught it from the other. Since they think it can be passed from dogs to humans, they will accuse the dog of being the culprit as well. However, they will also say the following, quote, Staphylococcus aureus, or staph, are bacteria that live on the skin and in the nose, usually without causing harm. MRSA is a type of staph. It is resistant to several types of antibiotics. Bacteria develop resistance to antibiotics when antibiotics are used often. Who gets MRSA? Anyone can get MRSA. It is found most often among people in hospitals and healthcare facilities, such as nursing homes, who have weakened immune systems, quote, end of quote. So let's just think critically for a moment about what else people have that are in hospitals and nursing homes. Yes, mostly they have junky food. The junkiest food on earth is served in hospitals and nursing homes. I am not exaggerating. Bad living conditions, general physical discomfort, stress, light and noise all the time, so they never get good healing sleep, and drugs to top all of that off. So is it any wonder that bacteria are going to proliferate in those kinds of conditions? No, it's no mystery. But I can't comment on the specific reason why all three of you have skin inflammation. I can only comment on the general reasons. For specific reasons, you need to examine your own lifestyle. But the reason why I can comment on the general reasons is because when you have an effect, you have a cause. In the case of skin lesions, the body is eliminating wastes through the skin because its normal channels are backlogged. The wastes coming through, as well as the tissue that they cause damage to, require consumption. Those things have to be consumed. It's a law of life. If it's a universal law. The bacteria are the consumers of this morbid material. They absolutely must be there. The body requires it. It not only requires it, it sends them to the sites where they are needed. It manufactures them when they are needed. So to say that you've gone down a rabbit hole online to try and heal it, I'll have to correct you there, because my understanding of that phrase, going down a rabbit hole, and I've never even read the story of Alice in Wonderland, but I know that this phrase comes from that fairy tale or whatever it is. But my understanding of it is that it means you're departing from your comfort zone and you're going into unexplored territory where conventional ideas are left behind. So to say that you've gone down a rabbit hole on the internet would be kind of an oxymoron, because all of the information on the internet will lead you back to conventional ideas, and it will lead you away from the truth. So I can only assume that what you really meant is that you've talked to people on social media, because places like our groups and a few others are really the only places that you can find anything resembling truth anymore. And obviously, if what you're reading was proving to be helpful to you, I don't think you'd still be asking these questions, obviously. So if you had taken that information in, if you had found it helpful and that it resonated with you, and you had put it in, put the information in place, applied it to your lifestyle that allows skin lesions to heal, then you obviously still wouldn't have the problem. So I'm pretty sure you've already heard this explanation for why it's happening in a general way from a natural hygiene perspective, because I've already shared that information with you, I'm sure. So I think the fundamental problem is the disconnect that continues to exist between that information and the ideas that you're unable to discard. And that's hard. I know how hard that is. My evidence of that is your mention of your lifestyle habits, and that's because they don't matter in the least. They do not matter in the least. As I said before, if you have an effect, it's a universal law that you must also have the cause. Effects cannot happen without causes, and MRSA cannot happen without toxemia. It cannot happen without toxemia. That disconnect is going to have to be repaired in your thinking, because it takes a lot of work to resolve this kind of problem. It takes a lot of work either way. If you decide you're going to clean up your diet, that's work. If you decide you're going to deal with the sickness, that's work too. So you have to decide which kind of work you're going to do. It's either the work is going to happen whether you do the right thing or the wrong thing. So the right thing is cleaning up the source of the waste that your body's having to eliminate. You already did that for your dog. And if there's any residual problems still happening with her, that would be because of the harmful interventions that you used before to try and resolve it. And as I recall, there were years of that, but I don't remember exactly what was given to the dog. So it'll take some time to heal. But you have to do something similar with yourself and your daughter. You know, nature doesn't care that your diet is better than your neighbor's or your husband's or your sister's. So to say that you eat healthy, quote unquote, is not relevant, and it's not meaningful in this conversation, because healthy compared to what? What's your standard? Are you comparing what you eat to what humans are biologically adapted to live on, and only that? I don't think so, because if you did, you would see that, you know, you would see your mistakes right away. So, you know, the good news about this kind of problem in a little kid is that they heal really fast when the source of the problem is taken away. The problem with healing this kind of problem in a little kid is we had a big, nasty world out there that the children have to interact in, and they get all kinds of harmful influence out there in the world, and, you know, people wanting to feed them junk and interfere and jab them without your knowledge and who knows what all. So, you know, but there are people that specialize in healing little kids and leading, you know, teaching little kids how to be healthy and how their lifestyle habits influence their health and create their disease and all of that. There are people that do that. I happen to know one who's very good at it. So anyway, and she's been doing it for a very long time too. But that's what you have to do. You have to clean up the source of the problem. And it sounds like you're kind of at a crossroads, a fork in the road, where you're having to decide whether you're going to treat this medically or if you're going to just trust that it will go away if you remove the cause. So anyway, you have to decide which way you're going to go. Okay, so now I will answer some questions for you. For the commenters, thanks for watching, guys. Okay, Madison. Madison has a bunch of questions. What is the longest amount of time it can possibly take for a 2-year-old bulldog to stop itching? She was on 5 milligrams prednisolone for 6 months. I got her off it 3 weeks ago, started RMF 2 weeks ago. Well, that's an impossible question for anybody to answer, but 2 weeks is way too early. Prednisone is not the worst thing you could have done. I'm going to see what happens when I bring this down to my screen so I don't have to crane my neck. Oh, there we go. Okay. Anyway, as I was saying, prednisone is not the worst thing that you can do for itching. If you had got, you know, if the dog had been on Apoquel or Cytopoint, some of the worst ones, and for a longer period than 6 months, it could take literally months for a dog to heal. And your next question is about gaining weight, and the good news is that a 2-year-old dog, you know, 2 is quite young. Bulldogs really seem to have so much going against them from the start because of their genetic, you know, issues. Not genetic issues relative to disease, but relative to just how their bodies function. They have this truncated respiratory system, and, you know, the flat face, and all of the things that make a bulldog what they are, visually, aesthetically, have consequences in the way the body functions. And I don't know what this would have to do with the skin, but they really do seem to have problems with skin. And my guess is 36 pounds is probably all you're going to get for now until the dog starts to heal, because digestive tract that was already not working well, because I assume you were feeding plenty of food. Everybody thinks that the solution to a dog being underweight is feeding more. So I assume that you had probably fallen into that trap too. And that obviously wasn't the solution. The solution is allowing the digestive tract to become fully efficient like it's supposed to be. And when you do that, then the body can start to make use of fuel. And the dog will most likely always be slim compared to other bulldogs, because bulldogs basically look like bowling balls, and except for the ones that are on RMF, and they actually have a nice svelte body shape. Next question from Madison. Should humans also do the RMF diet? Well, RMF is all about understanding biological appropriateness, species appropriateness. And of course, since that's all we're doing in RMF is recognizing the biological adaptations that dogs have developed over the eons that they've been on this planet, and feeding them according to that, then every species, yes, has a range of foods that are appropriate for that species. And humans have one of those, a range, a very distinct range, and it's absolutely scientifically known with all certainty, as much as any other fixed fact of science, even though all we get all day long is distraction and nonsense on the internet. And that's even worse now than it was 3-4 years ago, because if humans would just feed themselves properly, then the medical industry would pretty much just have to go away. And they're not going to go away. They're just getting bigger and bigger. And they know that the way that they get bigger and bigger is they keep telling humans that they're omnivores. What's an omnivore? An omnivore can pretty much eat anything that they can fit in their mouth, right? If you go around telling humanity that it's an omnivore and it can pretty much eat whatever it wants to, you think your industry, your sickness industry, is going to continue and get bigger and get richer? Yeah, of course it is. So yeah, we're not going to be hearing the truth online any more than we have in the past. It's going to get worse, but anyway, yes, the answer to your question is yes. How to cure canine papilloma in a dog's mouth? Well, this little wart-like thing, papilloma, is, I think it's a wart-like thing, if I'm recalling correctly. It's said to be caused by a virus, and you cure it the same way that you cure all extraneous lesions and growths on the body, and that is you take away the body's reason for putting it there. And what the body does with growths and tumors and all kinds of growths on the body like that, it's kind of like a storage closet for the body. That's what tumors are. When the body's eliminative organs get overwhelmed and it really can't push out any more waste, it has to find ways of storing it, because it otherwise only has the option of allowing it to just keep circulating and recirculating throughout the body. And it knows if it does that, then eventually those organs, those vital organs that the blood comes in contact with, that's carrying those wastes, are going to be, they're going to cause the death of the organism, the death of the animal. So what it does is it just, it just says, we got to get this stuff out of the bloodstream. It's causing lots of problems. Let's shove it over here. And that's all they do. It's like a storage closet. It's like how we use storage closets. It just sets the stuff aside. And once the burden stops coming in, once you stop burdening a dog with all of this stuff that produces waste in the body, that overwhelms the eliminative capacity of the body, that floats around in the bloodstream, that causes all these problems. Once you eliminate that from the stores, then the body can just reabsorb those things. And that's what happens. So, we can't predict which of them are going to be reabsorbed back into the body and go away. It's very unpredictable. Some growths will even get bigger while the body has all of this stored material coming back into the bloodstream because it wants to also clean out. Once you stop putting new waste in, it can take what has already been stored in the body, send it back into the bloodstream for eventual elimination from the body. So when it's doing that, it might shove a little more in that storage room, in that storage closet while it's working. So you could see a growth grow. You could see it get smaller. You could see it get bigger. And that's how we know that it's kind of folly to be always looking at the growth of tumors or the size of growths as an indicator of what's going on in the body, as an indicator of what's, whether there's improvement going on or not, because it doesn't indicate that at all. The only way that we can know that improvements have been made is by reflecting back on the way that we used to feed our dogs and the way that we're feeding them now. Okay, and weight gain, give it time. So somebody else has a comment. If you regarding weight gain, if you only just started a raw diet for the dog, give it time, no more meds of any kind, only love and raw foods. Oh, and Doreen says the game meat for dogs on Facebook is UK centered. Yeah, the thing that I was referring people to therefore is that there would be a lot of discussion on what people do about finding bullets and shot in the meat, because I know it's an issue. When a bird gets shot, they usually use shotguns, I think. So that would put little pellets all through the meat. So I imagine they've got that problem solved over there. I don't know. So that's something that's kind of unique to the UK, but we can learn from them about how to deal with lead in venison as well. Let me see. Moving on here. Valerie says, this is so relevant for me right now as I am considering adopting a new pup. It's sickening. I've always had rescues, but it makes me question it next time. Sad. I know it is really a hard decision. It's horrible. And it's really hard that those of us who have our hearts in the right place and we want to rescue dogs, but do we want a dog that already has, 1 foot in the grave, so to speak, because they've been so mistreated by the pharmaceutical industry while they were being rescued? It's just too bad that we don't have an option that will serve both of our aims, to keep dogs 100% healthy. Wouldn't it be nice to have an RMF rescue community someday, to just have dogs coming in and rehab them? If there was any money to be made in the truth, guys, then that would be what I would be doing right now. But, with the world being the way it is, and with my landlord wanting his rent paid every month, I can't do that. If there's anybody out there who would like to bankroll such an endeavor, I would be all over that. So wouldn't that be great? I mean, to only have healthy dogs, rehabbed dogs, and puppies that have gotten the right kind of start in life. I did that with my own puppy, and I can tell you that starting from day one with a healthy lifestyle makes all the difference. I just don't have any of the problems that other people do, and my dog is 6 now. Okay, next comment comes from Surgeon MD. Hi, Nora. Love the old version of the book. Thinking of getting the updated version. Thanks to your awesome knowledge, my dog Coda is in the best health and shape of his life. I can't thank you enough. Oh, that's great. Sweet. Thank you very much for saying that. Oh, Doreen says, it must have been when I was talking about MRSA. She says, ditch the scary dairy first and fast, fast, fast. Yeah. Yeah. And that's another problem with the so-called vegetarian diet, because dairy is just so hazardous to health for little kids and for adults. It's just really harmful to health. And that really needs to be the first thing that I would get rid of in the diet. But a lot of people who think that they need to eat dairy products in order to get their protein or their calcium or whatever the dairy industry is telling people, they will very often make up for not eating meat by eating more dairy products. And I suspect that's what happened with Linda McCartney, because she died fairly young and she was vegetarian for a very long time. So I suspect that she was buying that whole fairy tale about calcium and protein and was trying to make up for it by eating dairy products. Galadriel and Libertine says, how would you proceed to detect an allergy? Is there another way than eviction diet, and I assume you mean elimination diet, that requires to feed only elements the dog never eats? Well, I don't think allergies need to be detected. And it depends on what kind of allergy you're talking about. If it's a so-called food allergy, then you just need to start feeding the dog the foods that dogs are biologically adapted to eat, and it'll go away. Because very often, most often, when dogs are said to have food allergies, it's because the food in question doesn't belong in a dog's body to begin with. Like, for example, corn is said to be a common allergen in dogs. And corn really shouldn't be eaten by dogs at all. Dogs can't break it down. So, but I assume what you're talking about is some kind of skin issue, because when we're talking about allergies in dogs, that's usually what people are referring to. But you don't have to do an elimination diet at all. You just have to get the dog on what they are biologically adapted to eat, and that is raw meat, raw bones, raw organs, not too much fat. You got to be really attentive to the fat issue when you're feeding raw, because, and that's basically the difference between just feeding raw. And that's why I don't really say feeding raw or just raw feeding. I say RMF because it's such a huge, fat is such a huge factor in dog disease. And it's a challenge because we have to find foods that are, that don't carry all of the fat that agricultural animals do. Wild animals just don't. They don't. They carry roughly twice the protein and half of the fat that agricultural animals do. And that's what dogs are biologically adapted to eat. So once you start putting that stuff in, and only that stuff, then you find that these so-called allergies just go away. The allergy term there, I made a video about allergies. I have a long article about allergies, and I also address them pretty thoroughly in the book as well. So I would recommend taking advantage of all of those resources and educating yourself about what allergies really are, because what they really are is an enabling device for the medical industry to make sure that you know that the only way that you can treat an allergy is with a drug or with the so-called trigger avoidance. And they will make up all kinds of triggers, like, oh, your dog is triggered by grass, or, oh, it's pollen or fleas, or all the things that wild dogs are exposed to every day and have been exposed to every day since they first showed up on this planet. So that's what I would recommend doing. Just, educate yourself, start feeding the dog only RMF approved foods. And those would be not only the meats and bones that I was mentioning, but also plant foods. And the purpose that plant foods serve in RMF is to further decrease the overall fat consumption of dogs. So you have to find a balance, and the book will tell you how to do that. It has a flow chart, and you just go through and answer the questions, and it will tell you how many meat days you should be feeding, how many plant days. It won't tell you it won't quantify them specifically, but it will nudge you in the direction of whether you should feed a high plant rotation or a high meat rotation or whatever. So it gives you all the information that you need to deal with so-called allergies. Doreen says, my girls are driving us nuts with the begging, OCD liquor, love my deaf girl, and insane foraging. 2.5 years RMF, 214. Okay, so 2 plants, 1 meat. No, 2 plants, 1 meat. No, 1 fasting maybe, and 4 meat, or 2 meat. I'm not sure what that means. People mix up the order all the time. So anyway, but it doesn't really matter, because you can correct the begging and foraging with increased meat days. But the problem is, of course, that you might also get an uptick in the symptoms because of that fat thing. So you can increase the quantity of food if you decrease the fat. So if you sort of up your game a little bit when it comes to sourcing foods that are lower in fat, and that's hard to do. I'm telling you, it's getting harder all the time. And that's why I am so big on this wild scrap that I'm getting right now, and that my dog has practically been living on for the last, almost a year now. And it's mostly bones that I'm getting. It's not meat, but the bones have so much meat on them. And these are bones that are going to the landfill and to the rendering plant, because the hunters leave them behind at the processing place. So they'll go out and shoot a deer. They will take the deer to their local butcher. The butcher cuts off the steaks and the roasts, sends those home with the hunter. The hunter says thank you, pays the butcher, and the butcher is left with this pile of very meaty bones that he has nothing else to do with besides paying somebody to come pick them up for him. So there are lots of states where it's legal for you to buy it. It's legal for the butchers to sell it. And I've kind of made it my mission in my own state here of Washington to find out what the laws are and get confirmation of that from the so-called authorities. And I have approached butchers, and I've struck pay dirt a couple of times. So my freezers are full, and that's what I recommend that everybody does. It's not going to be possible for everybody to do that. So you need to focus on the foods that are naturally lowest in fats. And I love chicken legs for that reason. I love beef heart for that reason. Beef heart has no marbling at all. Once you trim the surface fat off of beef heart, it's extremely high quality, very dark meat. It's just a muscle. And it's also not expensive. It's much cheaper than its equivalent in lean beef. So much cheaper. So those 2 foods can make up a meal for a dog, a meat meal for a dog, and be extremely low in fat. You put a little liver in there, and you've got a whole meal. So chicken legs, you could even toss in turkey necks or chicken necks, and not be over, not feed too much fat. So yeah, it sounds like you have some resource guarding issues with one of the dogs. I guess you just have to feed them separately. That's kind of a different issue, and you can see an uptick in that too with RMF, because the food suddenly becomes more valuable. If 2 dogs live together and they always have a bowl of kibble that they can go eat anytime they want to, they stop seeing the food as valuable, and it's not really something they're willing to fight over. But when the food bowl is empty most of the time, except for at meal times, and they're only getting a certain amount and they want to eat their fill, that's what dogs do when they have the opportunity, then the food becomes a bit more of a target for resource guarding. So that can actually be worse on RMF than with kibble feeding. So it falls under those side effects, those trade-offs of RMF that I list in the book. Okay, a couple more questions here. My 4-year-old Brittany has problems with bones and organs. Well, I would need to know exactly what the problem is. Can she not chew? Do organs not keep her poops solid? Organs can cause loose poops. So you need to tell me what the specific problem is, and maybe I could answer. In the meantime, I'll go on to, okay. The person that asked about food allergies says, yes, skin issues related to food allergy. I'm indeed feeding raw. Okay, and that's why I'm careful not to use that phrase, raw feeding. Generally, I don't say raw feeding. I am careful to say RMF because there's a big difference between feeding raw and RMF. RMF includes practically nothing that would be included in the diet of a raw fed dog that is commercially fed. So if you're feeding any kind of commercial raw grind, then you can't do that on RMF. It's got way too much fat. Not only, oh man, where would I even start to educate somebody from scratch about commercial grinds? They are, not only when you take a chicken and toss the whole thing in a grinder, that would be one thing. That would be too much fat. That would be not resembling what that dog would eat in the wild. But that's not what happens. They don't buy whole chickens and throw them into the grinder. They go out and buy backs and necks and feet and other fatty parts that are practically free. And these people who are charging, $12 a pound, $15 a pound or more for these commercial grinds, they are just dipping their bucket in this river of these parts of animals that humans have no interest in. Nobody eats chicken backs. Nobody eats turkey tails. Nobody eats turkey backs. Those things are all available very cheaply on the wholesale market. And that's what all of these, once you get on Facebook's, once you make yourself a target on Facebook for their advertisers, you see a new one of these commercial raw food brands coming through your feed every day. And that's why, one more guy, one more gal out there decided that they were going to dip their bucket in that river of waste products that is flowing out of the animal agriculture industry and make some money off of it. And that's exactly what they're doing, because the animal industries make it very easy for these people to avail themselves of these waste products. And it's very, very lucrative to just dip your bucket in, take it back to the factory, drop it in a grinder, and sell it to somebody for $12 a pound and more, especially if they're, shipping it long distance. But they have the kibble industry to thank for people being so on board with this commercial raw food, because the commercial raw food or raw grind brands will tell you that it's complete and balanced. And everybody wants to think that when they're taking their dog off of kibble, that they're not abandoning that idea that their dogs need balance and they need a complete meal every time they eat. So they'll put those words on their labels and people will line up to buy it. So the bones come out like they went in. Sorry, my English is bad. Oh, okay. Jana is qualifying her question. She says, so the dog is pooping bones. Well, if you can identify which bones are coming out intact, you would need to just eliminate those. If it happens a lot, then you might want to consider getting a grinder. Or if that's out of the question, you can just mince bones. You really can't mince bones with a cleaver or an axe. You really can't eliminate bones out of the diet at all, because they are what solidifies the stool. If you try to feed a dog just boneless meats, then you're very likely going to get loose stools. So, and unless you are feeding properly, if she has a problem with all meat, and some dogs do, it's rare, but some dogs do, then you can feed plant foods for a while. And that would cause the hurting stomach, the pain in the stomach, to go away, because there's something in the current diet that's causing that problem. So I'm assuming from your first name that you're German, maybe. I don't know. We don't quite have the German translation of the updated book done yet. That's supposed to be done any time now. So any day, anyway. I would highly recommend getting that and putting those conditions in place so that condition can correct itself. Last question, what grinder would you recommend? I don't have a grinder. I've never had a grinder. As I recall, the grinder that most people talk about is available at, what's the name of that? It's the Cabela's. It's the Cabela. I think it has Cabela as a brand name. And it's like 1.5 horsepower or something. I believe it is mentioned on the big group and the private group on the in the files section, or someplace where products are listed. There used to be a product list in both groups, and I think it's probably still there. I'm just not sure where. So you can ask Kelly Jo that question. But I think probably any grinder that has as much power as 1.5 horsepower would do the trick. But there definitely is a recommendation for RMF, and I get no endorsement from that. Otherwise, I would know what the brands are right now. And Jana says her dog can only eat turkey and veggies. Okay, well, veggies probably aren't going to be too helpful, but I gather from that you don't have the book, because we really don't focus too much on veggies. The focus more is on fruit. Dogs really are not vegetable eaters. They do eat fruit out there in the wild, and they are completely capable of digesting fruit and making full use of fruit as a secondary food, but not so much with veggies. We don't see them eating corn out there in the wild. It's pretty rare. We don't see them digging up potatoes. We don't see them digging up roots, but we do see them, eating blueberries, eating lots of blueberries in some cases, like the Voyager wolves do. So RMF is more about fruit than veggies. But if you fed, if you went with my other suggestion about omitting meat temporarily for now, then you would want to feed some veggies. You might even want to feed some denser plant meals like lentils or chickpeas or quinoa, and the vegetables like sweet potatoes, squash, those kinds of things. But definitely get the book, because that will tell you how to do it properly. So, okay, well, I see that's all the questions. So good timing, guys, because I usually try to make these videos an hour or so long. So I'm so glad you guys were able to catch the live stream this time. And I hope some of you will join the subscription group and avail yourself of these chats that happen every Saturday, usually 2 p.m. Western time, Pacific time. And I tackle all the questions from the private group, and sometimes I pick out topics from the public group, the big group, and just randomly address those. I like to talk about information that you're not likely to get anywhere else. I think that's what makes RMF and this live stream really valuable. So anyway, that's all I have for this week, you guys. I hope you will join next week. I will see you in a week and a half on Saturday. I guess it'll be Saturday the 4th, November 4th. So until then, take care, everybody, and have a nice week. And happy Halloween. And I will see you in a week and a half. Bye for now. You're welcome. Bye-bye.